He stayed with me physically but left emotionally. I used to believe that losing someone happened in one dramatic moment, an argument, a betrayal, a slammed door. But I learned the harder truth. Sometimes you don't lose someone when they walk away. You lose them slowly, quietly, while they still share your bed, your meals, your home, your life. You lose them inch by inch, expression by expression, silence by silence. That is how I lost Daniel. Not to another woman, not to life's unpredictability, but to emotional withdrawal so subtle that I didn't realize he was already gone while he was still sitting right next to me. When I first met him, his eyes had a brightness I couldn't fully describe. He wasn't loud or showy. Daniel was the type of man whose presence you felt before you noticed him.
Calm, sharp, solid.
He had this habit of really listening when someone spoke like their words mattered. I didn't know then that one day I would long for nothing more than for him to listen to me the same way again. We met the summer after I turned 27. I was juggling my job, my parents' expectations, my own dreams, and the fear that my life wasn't moving fast enough. Daniel entered like a pause button, a moment of stillness in the chaos. We met in a bookstore. He was standing in the philosophy section, holding a book by Marcus Aurelius, when I accidentally bumped into him while reaching for a novel. I apologized, and he smiled at me like he already knew I would become important to him. That smile stayed with me for days. We talked about books and ideas and stupid things like why people pretend not to like pineapple on pizza. We began meeting for coffee, then dinners, then long walks around the lake. He noticed everything about me. My nervous tapping when I talked too fast, the way I tilted my head when thinking, the fact that I loved rainy days but hated umbrellas. He memorized pieces of me I didn't think anyone would pay attention to. Our relationship was a slow burn, lasting, steady, comfortable. We fit. Not perfectly, but gently. When he asked me to move in with him 2 years later, I said yes, without hesitation. When he held me at night, I felt the kind of safety I thought only existed in stories. But love, real love, requires more than shared space and warm hands. It requires presence, awareness, connection. These things can fade without you realizing it. The first signs arrived quietly. It started with the conversations, or rather, the loss of them. Daniel used to tell me everything, his worries at work, his frustrations, his plans, his dreams. But slowly his words became fewer. He stopped telling me when something bothered him. He stopped updating me about his day. When I asked, he'd shrug and say, "Nothing much. Nothing much." Every day, the same answer. Like his life had become a blank page. When he came home from work, he would hug me quickly, distractedly, then sit on the couch scrolling through his phone. We would eat dinner, sometimes talking, sometimes not. He used to kiss me while I cooked, teasing me for adding too much garlic. Now he barely glanced up from his screen. At first, I excused it. He's tired.
He's stressed.
Work is hard. He needs space. Love makes you rationalize slow abandonment. I thought it was temporary, a phase everyone goes through. After all, people grow comfortable in relationships. They settle. Routines replace excitement. But something deeper was shifting. Something that didn't feel like comfort, it felt like distance. The next sign was touch. Daniel had always been affectionate. Not overly so, but enough. He reached for my hand when we walked. He kissed me goodbye before leaving for work. He wrapped his arms around me at night. He pressed his forehead against mine when he apologized or wanted comfort. But slowly, subtly, he stopped. One night, months into this quiet shift, I reached for his hand while watching a movie. He didn't pull away, but he didn't hold back either. It was limp,
Cold.
like holding the hand of someone who forgot they were supposed to hold yours too. I told myself not to overthink it. I wish I had overthought it. There's a particular pain that comes when someone stops touching you the way they used to. It's not the loss of physical affection. It's the message behind it, the silent withdrawal, the awareness that you're reaching for someone who no longer reaches back. But I kept hoping. I watered a dying plant without realizing its roots had already turned brittle. Then came the silences. Not peaceful silences, the heavy, suffocating ones. The ones where you feel like you're talking to someone behind a locked door. His eyes wouldn't meet mine. His responses were clipped. His shoulders tensed when I walked into the room. He smiled at friends, at strangers, at coworkers, but not at me. I began to dread the evenings, not because I didn't love being near him, but because being near him felt like sitting next to a ghost version of the man I loved. I started blaming myself. Did I do something wrong? Did I overlook something? Was I not enough? Did I change without noticing? I replayed our moments over and over, searching for the mistake that made him drift away. But the hardest part wasn't the change, it was the denial. Are you okay? I'd ask. Yeah, he'd say. Are we okay? We're fine. Did I do something? No, stop overthinking. But I wasn't overthinking. I was observing. Observing a man who once held me like I was precious, now treating me like I was forgettable. The truth is, you always sense emotional departure before you understand it. One evening, a year into this shift, I found him sitting in the living room long after midnight, staring at nothing. His phone lay untouched beside him. I approached gently. Daniel? What's wrong? He blinked, as if waking from a trance. Nothing. Go to sleep. My heart cracked a little at those words. The next day, he left early for work without even saying goodbye. That was the first morning in 3 years he walked out without touching me. I realized something then. Daniel was still here, his clothes in the closet, his keys on the counter, his shoes by the door. But emotionally, he lived in another world, one I wasn't part of. We shared a home, but not a life. I tried everything to reach him. I planned small date nights.
He canceled them.
I cooked his favorite meals. He barely ate. I asked him to talk. He brushed it off. I tried to initiate intimacy. He avoided it gently, but persistently. I cried silently beside him, wishing he'd notice. He didn't. He slept next to me every night, yet I had never felt more alone. One morning, as I watched him tie his shoelaces, I asked softly, "Are you unhappy with me?" He paused. Just a second. Barely noticeable. But it was enough to answer the question I had feared. "No," he said finally. "I'm just tired. Tired." The universal excuse for emotional absence. He kissed my forehead before leaving that day. It was the first kiss in weeks. But it felt empty, like kissing goodbye to someone who had already left. The more he pulled away, the more desperate I became. Not clingy or dramatic. Just aching. Trying to understand how someone could love you deeply once, and then slowly stop without explanation. One night, as he slept, I lay awake staring at the ceiling. I felt the distance between us like a canyon. I reached for his hand, but it was curled inward, away from me. I cried quietly. Again. I wondered what changed. Was it me? Was it him? Was it life? Was it inevitable? Was it preventable? The following week, everything came crashing down. We were getting ready for bed when Daniel's phone buzzed with a message. He rarely reacted to notifications, but this one made him sit up straighter. His eyes softened as he read the screen, softened in a way they hadn't for me in months. I froze. He quickly locked the phone, too quickly, and placed it face down. Something inside me twisted. "Who was that?" I asked. He hesitated for the first time. "A friend from work." The lie was too quick, too smooth, too easy. I didn't say anything else, but for the first time, I understood the real possibility. Emotional abandonment sometimes attaches itself elsewhere. I didn't accuse him of cheating. I didn't assume the worst. Maybe it wasn't romantic. Maybe he confided in someone else. Maybe he felt understood by someone who wasn't me. But the deeper truth? He no longer felt understood by me. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept remembering the way his face softened when he read that message, soft in a way I hadn't seen directed at me in so long. The next morning, while he showered, I walked past his phone, lying on the table. I didn't touch it. I didn't look at anything. I just stared at the device that now held a part of him he no longer shared with me. I felt like a stranger in my own relationship. A week later, everything reached its breaking point. We were in the kitchen. I asked something simple. "Do you want to have dinner together tonight?" He sighed heavily. Not annoyed, exhausted. A sigh full of the emotional weight he refused to discuss. Can we not do this right now? He muttered. Not do what? Invite you to dinner? Try to spend time with you? Try to save whatever fragile thread is left between us? What's going on with you, Daniel? I asked softly, trying not to cry. I'm losing you, and I don't know why. He leaned against the counter, rubbing his forehead. You're not losing me. But I am, I insisted, my voice trembling. You're here, but you're not here. You stay with me physically, but emotionally, you're somewhere else. Silence. The kind of silence that confirms the truth without a single word. Finally, he whispered, I don't know what's wrong with me. But he did. I could see it in the way his eyes avoided mine. The truth was simple. He didn't love me the way he used to. Not because the love disappeared overnight, but because he stopped nurturing it. Because emotional distance became easier than communication. Because comfort replaced effort. Because feelings fade when ignored. Over the next few days, we lived in a quiet limbo. A strange, hollow coexistence. We shared the same rooms, but different emotional realities. I cried in the shower, so he wouldn't hear. He stared blankly at the TV, pretending not to notice how I avoided his eyes. Eventually, I realized something painful. Love cannot survive on physical presence alone. It needs emotional engagement. Without it, the relationship becomes a house with lights still on, but no one living inside. One evening, after months of confusion and heartbreak, I finally said the words I had been avoiding. I think we need space. Daniel looked at me for a long moment. His expression didn't show anger or sadness, just resignation. A quiet acknowledgement that the truth had finally caught up to us. Maybe you're right, he said. We slept in the same bed that night, inches apart, but it felt like we were continents away. The next week, I packed a suitcase and stayed with my sister for a while. I expected him to stop me, to grab my hand, to say we could fix things. He didn't. He watched me leave with an expression I'll never forget, regret mixed with relief. The relief hurt the most. During the weeks apart, I waited for him to reach out, to ask about us,
To ask about me.
to fight for what we had. But the only message I received was, "Hope you're doing okay." 8 empty words. I realized then that I had been holding on to a ghost. Daniel stayed with me physically long after he had stopped being mine emotionally. He wasn't cruel. He wasn't unfaithful, not in the physical sense. But he withdrew, and withdrawal is its own kind of betrayal. Months later, after we ended things officially, he admitted something quietly over coffee. I didn't know how to tell you that I felt numb. I didn't want to hurt you. So I stayed. I thought the numbness would go away. It didn't, and I paid the price for his silence. Looking back, the hardest part wasn't losing him. It was losing myself trying to hold on to someone who was already halfway out the door. I loved Daniel. Truly. But love is not enough when only one person is fighting for connection. A relationship cannot survive on physical presence alone. It needs two hearts willing to show up fully, consistently, honestly. He stayed with me physically, but left emotionally long before we broke up. And in the end, I learned something life-altering. When someone stops choosing you emotionally, their body might remain, but their soul has already moved on. And you cannot build a life with a body that's present, but a heart that isn't. I'm healing now. Slowly.
Steadily.
Learning to choose myself again. Learning that emotional abandonment is not a reflection of my worth, but of someone else's silence. Learning that physical closeness means nothing without emotional presence. And most importantly, learning this truth. Never beg someone to stay. If their heart has already left, let their body follow.